The air inside the Cathar embassy was cool and still. It smelled of clean metal and of a strange, sweet flower that Jin had helped to save. Jin stood quietly, waiting. He was a man from Earth, a botanist, a person who understood plants better than he understood people. His work with the sacred glowing plants of the Cathar had been a success. He had found a cure for the sickness that was killing them. Because of this, the Cathar were grateful. They were a very old and wise species. Their bodies were long and slender, with skin the color of moonlight on water. They did not show emotion on their faces. Their thanks was not a party or a medal. It was an offer to speak with their oracle. This was a great honor. No human had ever been given this chance. Jin felt nervous, but he was also curious. He followed a Cathar guide through the silent, shining halls. The walls seemed to be made of light itself. They finally stopped before a large round door. It opened without a sound. "You may enter," the Cathar guide said, its voice a soft hum. "The oracle will speak with you, do not be afraid." Jin stepped inside. The door closed behind him. The room was not a room at all. It was like being inside a star. Points of light swirled all around him, moving in slow, beautiful patterns. He felt weightless, though his feet were still on the floor. There was no chair, no table, nothing solid. In the center of the light, a presence began to form. It was not a body. It was a collection of energy, a mind. A voice filled his head. It was not a sound he heard with his ears. It was a thought that was not his own. It was calm and vast, like an ocean, Jin of Earth. "We see you." Jin swallowed. "I am here," he said, his own voice sounding small. "You have done us a great service. The song of the void, our most sacred flower, will continue to bloom because of your work. Your species possesses a unique connection to life. We wish to give you a gift, a glimpse of what may be." The lights around him swirled faster. Images began to flash in front of his eyes. He saw himself on a starship. He saw himself looking at star charts, working in a small lab with strange plants. He felt a sense of purpose. He was on a mission. "This is your future path. You will be assigned to the deep space research vessel, Odyssey. Your skills will be needed there." Jin felt a wave of excitement. This was the assignment he had hoped for. "Thank you," he whispered. The voice continued, its tone unchanged. "There is more. A key variable in your probability stream. A new image formed. A woman. She had dark hair and a thoughtful face. She was wearing an engineer's uniform, holding a data pad, and she was smiling at someone off-screen. Jin felt a sudden, unexpected pull towards her image. He did not know who she was, but the sight of her made his heart beat faster. "You will meet her. Her name is Mirai. She will be the chief engineer on the Odyssey." The image of Mirai grew brighter, more vivid. Jin saw them working together, sharing a meal in the ship's mess hall, laughing about something. He saw the warmth in her eyes when she looked at him. He felt a happiness he had never known. It was a future full of light. Then the image shattered. The warm light turned a harsh, warning red. The vision of Mirai twisted. He saw her face now filled with fear. He heard the blaring of alarm sirens. He saw a flash of fire in a ship corridor. The image of the Odyssey appeared, its hull torn open, spilling air and debris into the blackness of space. "This is the convergence point," the oracle's voice intoned, now cold and sharp as ice. "The emotional connection you form with the human female Mirai is a destructive force. It is an irrational variable that destabilizes all logical outcomes." Jin watched, horrified, as the vision played out. He saw himself, in the vision, making a reckless choice during a crisis. He was abandoning his post, running towards engineering, because he saw that Mirai was in danger. His action, born of panic and love, caused a chain reaction. A door sealed too late. A power conduit overloaded. The chain of failures spread like lightning through the ship. The final image was the Odyssey, broken and silent, drifting in the void. A tomb. The probability is 99.87%, the oracle stated. the number hanging in the air like a death sentence. If you form a deep emotional bond with her, if you love her, it will lead to this: the death of the crew, the destruction of the ship. Her death, your death. Jin felt as if all the air had been sucked from his lungs. The beautiful future he had seen just moments before was a lie. It was a trap. The happiness was the bait, and the catastrophe was the sure result. No, he breathed. There must be another way, a different choice. We have calculated 23,412,805 possible decision paths from your first meeting, the Oracle replied. Its voice was absolute. In every single one where you allow the emotion you call love to flourish, the result is catastrophic failure. The path is fixed. The logic is immutable. The swirling lights began to slow down. The presence in the center of the room started to fade. The gift of our gratitude is this warning, the Oracle said, its voice growing distant. To ensure your survival, and the survival of all on that ship, you must ensure one thing. You must ensure you never love her. This is not a suggestion. It is a statistical certainty. The light vanished. Jin was standing alone in a plain, gray, empty room. The door slid open. His Cathar guide was waiting, silent and unmoving. Jin walked out of the room, his legs feeling weak. The guide led him back through the shining halls. The world outside the embassy was bright and noisy, full of the sounds of the city. But Jin heard none of it. All he could hear was the echo of the Oracle's final words in his mind. Never love her. He looked up at the sky, where the stars were beginning to appear. One of those stars was where the Odyssey was waiting, where Mirai was waiting. The woman whose smile had for a moment promised him everything. The woman who, according to the most advanced intelligence in the galaxy, would be the death of him. He had a choice to make. He could follow the logic, the cold, hard math that promised survival. Or he could follow the strange, warm feeling her image had sparked in his chest, a feeling that promised ruin. He had never felt more human, or more alone. The prophecy of certain ruin was now a part of him, a weight he would have to carry every day. The transport ship shuddered as it docked with the deep space research vessel Odyssey. Jin clutched the strap of his bag, the Oracle's words a cold, hard stone in his stomach. Never love her. He walked through the connecting tunnel, the metal groaning around him. He was reporting for duty, but it felt like walking to his own execution. The Odyssey was large and bright. Crew members moved with purpose through the wide corridors. Jin found his way to the botany lab, a small room filled with the soft glow of growth lamps and the smell of damp earth and leaves. It was his sanctuary. Here, among the plants, he could almost forget the prophecy. Plants were predictable. They followed rules of light, water, and nutrients. They did not have emotions that could doom a starship. His first week was a cycle of work, meals, and sleep. He kept to himself. He spoke only when necessary, his answers short and polite. He ate his meals quickly in the mess hall, often choosing a corner table far from others. He was building a wall around himself, brick by brick, following the only plan that promised survival. And then he saw her. She was in the mess hall, sitting with a group of engineers. Her laughter cut through the low hum of conversation, a warm, clear sound that made people at nearby tables smile. Mirai. She was just as the Oracle had shown him. Her dark hair was tied back, and she was gesturing with her hands, explaining something about a plasma injector. Her energy filled the space around her. Jin quickly looked down at his food, his heart hammering against his ribs. The cold stone in his gut felt heavier. He finished his meal in 3 more bites and left, without looking in her direction again. Their paths were destined to cross. The ship's command assigned a joint project, improving the air filtration system using a new, fast-growing moss from Jin's lab. He would be working directly with the engineering team. With her. Their first meeting was in the main engineering bay. The air hummed with power. Jin stood nervously by a console, datapad in hand. "You must be Jin," a voice said behind him. He turned. It was her. Up close, her eyes were warm and intelligent. She smiled at him, and it was like a physical blow. The oracle's warning screamed in his mind. "I'm Mirai," she said. "I hear you're the one with the magic moss." Jin nodded, forcing his face to remain neutral. "It is not magic. It is a very efficient photosynthetic organism." Her smile didn't fade. "Well, this very efficient photosynthetic organism is going to save us a lot of power. I'm glad you're here." He gave a short, stiff bow of his head. "Let us begin. I have the initial growth parameters," he was cold. He was professional. He spoke only about the moss, the nutrient solutions, the light cycles. He avoided looking at her for too long. When their hands accidentally brushed as they both reached for the same tool, he pulled his back as if burned. Mirai noticed. She was not a person who missed details. She saw the way he closed himself off, the way he never met her eyes for more than a second. At first, she thought he was just shy, but as days turned into a week, his behavior felt like a constant, quiet rejection. One afternoon, as they were installing the first moss trays in a ventilation shaft, she tried again. "The stars are beautiful from the observation deck this cycle," she said, wiping a smudge of grease from her cheek. "Have you been?" "I have been busy," Jin replied, not looking up from his scanner that monitored the moss's health. "Everyone needs a break. Maybe you could—" "My work requires focus," he interrupted, his voice tighter than he intended. A silence fell between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Mirai sighed softly and went back to sealing the access panel. The wall around him was thick, and she was starting to think there was no way through. Jin saw the hurt in her eyes before she turned away, and it made him feel sick. He wasn't trying to be cruel. He was trying to save her life. He was trying to save everyone. Every kind word from her felt like a test he was destined to fail. Every smile was a step closer to the fire in the broken hull he had seen in the vision. The ship's routine continued. A week later, there was a scheduled spacewalk. A cluster of external sensors on the starboard hull needed recalibration. It was a two-person job. The assignment roster came through. It was Jin and Mirai. A cold dread settled over Jin. Being trapped alone with her in the lab was one thing. Being tethered together in the utter silence of space felt like a dangerous step towards the fate he was fighting against. They suited up in the airlock, in silence. The heavy white EVA suits made them look anonymous, which Jin was grateful for. He checked her suit's systems, his fingers clumsy through the thick gloves, and she checked his. Her helmet visor was up. "All systems green," she said, her voice flat and professional. The warmth was gone. The wall was working. "Confirmed," Jin said. The outer airlock door slid open, revealing the infinite blackness of space, pinpricked by hard, bright stars. The Earth was a distant blue marble. Jin attached his safety tether to the rail and pushed off, floating out into the void. Mirai followed. The silence was profound. The only sound was his own breathing, and the faint crackle of the comms in his helmet. They worked methodically, moving along the hull from one sensor node to the next. Jin focused on the task, on the tools, on the metal under his hands. Anything to avoid looking at the woman working beside him. They were almost finished. Mirai was replacing a power cell on the final sensor. Jin was holding the toolkit, anchored a few meters away, watching the star-dusted curve of the ship's hull. It happened without warning, a cloud of cosmic dust, too small for the ship's sensors to flag as a danger, swept over them. It was like being sandblasted by the universe. Tiny particles moving at incredible speed pinged against their suits. Micrometeoroid shower. Mirai's voice was sharp in his ear. "Minor impact. My primary tether is fraying." Jin's head snapped towards her. He saw the thin cable, one of the two lines connecting her to the ship, vibrating violently. Several of its strands had already snapped. The secondary tether was still holding, but it was not meant to bear a full load for long. The Oracle's vision flashed before his eyes. Fire. Alarm sirens. Her face filled with fear. "Do not move," Jin said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I am coming to you." "Jin, no, the debris is still—" He had already unclipped his own primary tether. It was the most reckless thing he had ever done. Now only one thin line held him to the Odyssey. He pushed off from the hull, floating untethered towards her. The tiny particles stung his suit as he moved. He was a target, drifting in open space. His gloved hand caught a handhold on the hull near her. He pulled himself close. Their helmet visors were only inches apart. He could see the wide, startled look in her eyes. Without a word, he unclipped the backup tether from his own suit and clipped it to the hard point on her chest, creating a new, secure link between them. "What are you doing?" she whispered over the comm. "Making sure you are safe," he said simply. He reattached his own primary tether to a new point, securing them both. The shower of dust passed as quickly as it had come. The danger was over. They finished the work in silence and made their way back to the airlock. The procedures felt endless: repressurization, suit removal, system checks. Finally, they stood in the ready room, back in their standard uniforms. The adrenaline was fading, leaving Jin feeling hollow. Mirai stood by the lockers, looking at him. The professional coldness was gone from her face, replaced by a deep confusion. "You risked yourself," she said quietly. "You broke protocol. You could have been killed." Jin looked down at the floor. He had done exactly what the Oracle had warned him against. He had acted on emotion, not logic. He had put himself in danger for her. And yet the ship was not destroyed. They were both alive. "I reacted," he said, unable to explain. "You reacted to save me," she said. She took a step closer. "Why? You have done nothing but push me away for weeks. You act like I have some disease. And then, out there you do that." He finally looked up and met her gaze. The wall he had built so carefully was crumbling. He saw the person behind the prophecy. He saw her intelligence, her strength, and the genuine concern in her eyes. The Oracle had shown him a cold image and a terrible end. It had not shown him her laughter. It had not shown him the determined set of her jaw when she was working. It had not shown him the kindness she kept trying to offer him even when he rejected it. The Oracle's warning was a fact, a number, 99.87%. But standing here, looking at Mirai, that number felt empty. It was a calculation. It was not life. He made a choice. Not a slow, considered one, but a sudden, certain one that rose from a place deeper than fear. He allowed himself to really see her, and he let the walls fall. A small, tired smile touched his lips. "I am sorry," he said, and for the first time his voice was soft. "I have been distant. It was not because of you." Mirai studied his face, seeing the change. The guardedness was gone. The man in front of her now seemed real. Then why? He couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet, maybe not ever. But he could give her this. He could stop fighting the pull he felt towards her. "It is a long story," he said, "but it is a poor excuse. Would you still like to see the stars from the observation deck?" Her expression softened. The confusion melted away, replaced by a cautious warmth. "I would," she said. "I would like that very much." As they walked out of the ready room together, Jin knew he had crossed a line. He had chosen the path the Oracle had forbidden. He had decided with a full heart to walk towards the catastrophe. Because looking at Mirai, hearing her agree to see the stars with him, felt less like doom and more like the first true thing he had done in a very long time. He was falling, and he was no longer trying to stop himself. He was going to love her. The observation deck was a dome of transparent alloy, offering a perfect, unimpeded view of the universe. When Jin and Mirai entered, the ship was passing a nebula, a vast cloud of glowing pink and violet gas. It was like sailing through a dream. For a long time they didn't speak. They just stood side by side, watching the cosmos unfold. The silence between them was no longer heavy or uncomfortable. It was peaceful. It was the first time Jin had felt truly calm since his meeting with the Oracle. "It's bigger than you can ever imagine from a picture," Mirai said, her voice quiet with awe. "Yes," Jin agreed. His eyes were not on the nebula, but on the way its light reflected in her eyes. "It is." That night was the start of a new routine. The wall Jin had built was gone. He began eating meals with Mirai and the other engineers. He learned their names. He listened to their stories. He even started to share little pieces of his own life, his love for botany, his home in a coastal city in Korea, his fondness for a specific type of seaweed soup his mother used to make. Mirai's initial caution quickly melted into a genuine fondness. She discovered that behind the quiet, serious man was someone with a dry sense of humor and a deep curiosity about how things worked. They became a team, not just on the Moss project, which was a great success, but in their daily lives. They worked together in the lab. They exercised in the ship's gym. They spent their free hours on the observation deck, talking about everything and nothing. Jin found himself happier than he had ever been. The oracle's prophecy began to feel like a bad dream, a story about another person in another life. How could this feeling, this warmth, this connection, this sense of belonging possibly lead to ruin? It felt like the opposite. It felt like being found, not lost. The love he had been warned against did not make him reckless or careless in his work. It made him more focused. He had a reason to be careful, a reason to make sure the ship was safe. He was protecting her. Their relationship was not a distraction. It was an anchor. One day, the ship-wide alarm blared, a harsh, pulsing sound that meant a critical system failure. Jin was in the botany lab. Mirai was in main engineering. A voice came over the comms. It was the captain. All personnel, this is the captain. We have a catastrophic failure in the portside plasma manifold. Engineering teams report immediately. All non-essential personnel stand by. Jin's blood ran cold. The plasma manifold was the heart of the ship's propulsion. A failure there could leave them dead in space. He knew Mirai would be at the center of the crisis. He wanted to run to engineering, to find her, to make sure she was okay. The old fear, the oracle's fear, gripped him. This is it, a voice in his head whispered. This is the beginning of the end. Your emotions will cloud your judgment. You will cause the disaster. He took a deep breath. He was a botanist, not an engineer. Running to her would not help. It would only get in the way. He had to trust her. He had to have faith in her skill. He forced himself to stay in the lab, monitoring his plants, his hands clenched into fists. Down in engineering, the situation was bad. The manifold had overheated and ruptured. Thick, acrid smoke filled the air. Emergency lights cast a red glow over the chaos. The ship's main computer, which was based on Cathar logic systems, had already run its diagnostics. Analysis complete. The computer's flat voice stated, plasma manifold integrity compromised. Containment field failure is imminent. Recommended action. Initiate emergency jettison of the entire portside propulsion assembly. Mirai stared at the readout in horror. Jettisoning the assembly would save the rest of the ship from a plasma explosion, but it would also leave them with only half their engine power. They would be stranded years from the nearest station, relying on a slow, dangerous tow. No, she said, her voice firm. That's not a solution. That's a surrender. The logic is sound, the chief engineer said, his face grim. The failure cascade is irreversible. The computer has calculated over 1 million scenarios. There is no path to repair. The computer doesn't know everything, Mirai shot back. She was already pulling up the manifold schematics on a large display. Her mind was racing, looking for another way, any other way. For hours she worked. The rest of the engineering team, following the computer's advice, began preparing for the jettison. But Mirai did not stop. She traced power conduits, plasma flow rates, and magnetic field calibrations. Her eyes were red from the smoke and fatigue. The logical solution was to give up on the manifold. But something in her, some stubborn human spark, refused to accept it. Jin couldn't stay away any longer. He came down to the entrance of engineering, where a security officer was blocking access. He saw Mirai through the window, a solitary figure surrounded by screens and smoke, her face a mask of concentration. He didn't try to go in. He couldn't fix the manifold, but he could do something else. He went to the mess hall and got a hot meal and a cup of strong tea. He brought it back to the engineering entrance. Can you please give this to Chief Engineer Mirai? He asked the security officer. The officer nodded and took the tray inside. A few minutes later, Jin saw Mirai look up from her screens as the officer placed the food and tea beside her. She looked exhausted. She picked up the cup, took a sip, and then her eyes found Jin's through the window. She didn't smile. There was no time for that, but she gave him a small, determined nod. It was a message. I see you. I'm still fighting. That small nod was like a fuel injection to her spirit. She turned back to the schematics, and a new idea, a crazy, illogical idea, sparked in her mind. What if they didn't try to fix the main flow? What if they bypassed the ruptured section entirely by rerouting power through the secondary cooling system? It was a system not designed for that purpose. The computer would never suggest it. It was a risk. It could cause a bigger explosion, but it was also their only chance. She called her team over. Forget the computer's plan. We're trying something new. They worked for another 6 hours straight. Jin stayed outside, a quiet sentinel. He didn't sleep. He just waited. He believed in her. Finally, the red emergency lights switched off and the normal white lights flickered back on. The frantic alarms fell silent. The chief engineer walked out of the bay, his face smeared with soot but split by a wide grin. "We did it," he said to the gathered crowd. "Mireille did it. She found a workaround. The manifold is stable. We have full engine power." A cheer went up. Jin felt a wave of relief so powerful his knees felt weak. Later, in her quarters, Mireille was finally cleaning up. There was a soft chime at her door. It was Jin. She opened the door. She looked completely drained, but her eyes were bright. "You saved the ship," Jin said. "We saved the ship," she corrected him. She reached out and took his hand. "You saved me. When I saw you there and you brought that tea, I was ready to give up. But you reminded me what I was fighting for." They stood there for a moment, hands linked. The crisis was over. The ship was safe. And it was safe not because they had followed cold, unfeeling logic, but because of human stubbornness. Because of a connection that gave someone the strength to work for 36 hours straight. The Oracle had been wrong. Love had not caused a disaster. The love Jin felt for Mireille, and the determination she felt because of it, had given her the strength to do the impossible. It was a logic the computer could never understand, a logic of the heart. And for the first time, Jin truly, fully believed that their future was their own to make. The victory with the plasma manifold felt like a new beginning. For weeks, the mood on the Odyssey was light. The crew saw Jin and Mireille not as a dangerous variable, but as a lucky charm. Their connection had saved the ship. Jin allowed himself to believe, truly believe, that the Oracle was wrong. The future was not fixed. They had rewritten it. Then the distress call came. It was a weak automated signal repeating on a Cathar emergency frequency. It was from a science outpost designated K7 on the edge of a remote star system. The message was simple. Systems failing. Life support critical. Request immediate assistance. The Odyssey was the only ship in the sector. The captain, a good man named Lee, did not hesitate. "Set a course for outpost K7, he ordered. "Maximum speed." A quiet tension settled over the bridge. Jin stood near the science station, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. Cathar. The name alone was enough to bring the prophecy screaming back into his mind. He looked at Mireille, who was at her engineering post. She met his gaze and gave him a small, reassuring smile. He tried to smile back, but it felt weak. As they dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the outpost, the sight that greeted them was not what they expected. The outpost was not dark and silent. Its lights were on, but they were flickering erratically. And swarming around it like metal insects were 3 large, jagged ships, scavengers, battle stations. Captain Lee's voice was sharp. "Red alert! Shields up!" The scavengers were a known danger. They were not a unified species, but a ruthless collection of pirates and thieves. They preyed on the weak, stripping ships and stations for valuable parts and technology. They showed no mercy. The Odyssey was a research vessel. It had defensive shields and a few laser cannons for clearing small asteroids. It was not a warship. The scavenger vessels were built for fighting. The first blast rocked the Odyssey before its shields were fully charged. The ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared. Jin grabbed a console to steady himself. On the view screen, he saw one of the scavenger ships turn its main weapon towards them. Evasive maneuvers. The captain yelled. The next hit was a direct impact. It felt like the universe had exploded. The lights on the bridge flickered and died, replaced by the dim red glow of emergency power. Jin was thrown to the floor. The sound of tearing metal was deafening. He pushed himself up, his ears ringing. The view screen was cracked but still working. He saw it then, the exact image from the Oracle's vision. A flash of fire in the corridor outside the bridge. The acrid smell of smoke filled the air. "Report," Captain Lee shouted, clutching a bleeding cut on his forehead. "Direct hit to Deck 7, a crewman yelled. "The port engine is offline. Hull breach in sections 20 through 23. Jin's heart stopped. Deck 7. "Main engineering, Mireille," he whispered. He looked at the status display. The port engine, her domain, was a mess of red warning lights. The internal comms were down. He had no way of knowing if she was alive. The captain was receiving more reports, his face growing paler with each one. The hit caused a cascade failure in the portside power core. "It's going critical. We have to vent the core or it will take the whole ship." Venting the core meant opening the outer hull on that entire side. It would expose several decks, including main engineering, to the vacuum of space. It would kill everyone in those sections. It was the logical textbook procedure to save the rest of the ship. "The core is in engineering, sir," the tactical officer said, his voice hollow. "There are at least 20 crew members trapped in there." The blast doors sealed when the hull was breached. The bridge fell silent. They all knew what that meant. Captain Lee closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them, they were filled with a terrible grief. "The needs of the many," he said, his voice rough. "Initiate emergency core venting. Authorization Lee 79er. Jin stared at the captain. This was it. This was the moment from the prophecy. The captain was making the logical choice. The choice that saved most of the crew. The choice that sacrificed Mirai. The Oracle's voice echoed in his mind. "If you love her, it will lead to this," but the Oracle had it backwards. His love wasn't causing him to make a reckless choice that doomed the ship. The ship was already doomed. His love was giving him a choice at all. "No," Jin said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the chaos on the bridge. Everyone turned to look at him. "Mr. Jin," the captain said, his tone warning. "That is an order." "You are going to kill them," Jin said, his voice getting stronger. "You are going to kill her. It is the only way to save the 300 other souls on this ship," the captain replied, his voice tight with pain. "It is the logical decision." "Logic?" Jin took a step forward. "Logic does not get to decide who lives and who dies today." Before anyone could stop him, he turned and ran from the bridge. He ignored the shouts behind him. He sprinted through the smoke-filled corridors, heading for the shuttle bay. The Oracle's vision played in his head, but he was changing it. He wasn't running in a panic. He was running with a purpose. He reached a small one-person maintenance shuttle. He slammed the button to open the hatch and jumped inside. His fingers flew over the controls, starting the launch sequence. The shuttle bay doors began to open. On the bridge, the tactical officer saw it on his screen. "Captain, someone is launching a shuttle." "Who is it?" It's Jin, the botanist." The captain watched the small shuttle streak away from the Odyssey on the cracked view screen. He thought the man was insane, fleeing the dying ship. But then he saw the shuttle's trajectory. It wasn't heading away from the battle. It was flying directly towards the Odyssey's crippled engineering section. Jin piloted the tiny shuttle through a storm of debris and laser fire. He was not a trained pilot. The shuttle was not built for combat. It was a suicide mission. One of the scavenger ships saw the small craft and turned its weapons towards it. Jin weaved and dodged, his movements clumsy and desperate. He was a distraction, a tiny, annoying fly, but that distraction was enough. For a few precious seconds, the scavenger ship was focused on him instead of the wounded Odyssey. In those seconds, the Odyssey's tactical officer, seeing the opening, fired the ship's remaining laser cannons. The blast caught the scavenger ship by surprise, hitting its engine and disabling it. Jin didn't see it. He was focused on the mangled hull of the Odyssey. He saw the gaping hole near engineering. He guided the shuttle towards it, his heart pounding. He had no plan. Only a goal: get to Mirai. He set the shuttle down clumsily just inside the breached hull, the metal screaming under the stress. He put on an emergency spacesuit helmet, grabbed a tool, and forced the shuttle's door open. The engineering bay was a nightmare. Exposed wires sparked in the darkness. Twisted metal was everywhere. The air was thin and cold. He saw figures moving in the gloom using handheld lights. "Mirai!" he yelled, his voice echoing in his helmet. A light swung towards him. Jin, it was her. She was alive. She was helping another crew member, her face smudged with soot, but her eyes were clear and sharp. "What are you doing here?" she shouted. "The core is going critical." The captain was going to vent the core, to sacrifice this section. He yelled back, running to her side. "I couldn't let that happen." The shock on her face was immediate, but it was quickly replaced by the mind of an engineer. "Then we have to stop it. The automatic venting sequence is controlled from the primary console. If we can manually override it and stabilize the core, we can save the ship." Together, they fought their way to the main console. It was half destroyed, but Mirai knew every circuit. With Jin holding a light and helping her move fallen debris, she worked. It was a race against time. The prophecy was happening, but they were changing the ending. He had not come here and caused a failure. He had come here and given her a chance to fix it. With a final, desperate command entered into the broken console, the frantic beeping of the core warning stopped. The shaking in the deck plates eased. The core stabilized. They had done it. They had stopped the cascade. In the sudden quiet, Mirai turned to Jin. She looked at the man who had just flown through a battle in a tiny shuttle, who had disobeyed a direct order, who had risked everything for a chance, just a chance, to save her. She threw her arms around him, holding him tightly in the cold, damaged ruins of her engineering bay. "You crazy man," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You beautiful crazy man." On the bridge, the captain stared at the status board in disbelief. The core was stable. The venting sequence had been cancelled. The portside hull was still breached, but the ship was not going to explode. He looked at the view screen, at the small, brave shuttle now lodged in the side of his ship. He had tried to make the logical choice. The botanist had made the human one, and against all odds, the human choice had saved them all. The prophecy had been fulfilled in the details, but broken in its conclusion. Love had not brought the ruin. It had brought the rescue. The battle was over. The two remaining scavenger ships, seeing their leader disabled, had fled into the darkness. The Odyssey was wounded but alive. The silence that settled over the ship was heavy with exhaustion and the slow processing of shock. Emergency teams worked through the damaged sections, sealing hull breaches and helping the wounded. Jin and Mirai, along with the other engineers who had survived in the bay, were rescued from the wreckage. They were tired, covered in grime, but unharmed. The crew looked at Jin differently now. He was no longer just the quiet botanist. He was the man who had stolen a shuttle and flown into hell. Whispers followed him through the corridors. Some called him a hero. Others, in hushed tones, called him a fool who had almost gotten them all killed for one person. Jin did not care. He had Mirai. That was all that mattered. A day later, the Odyssey was stable enough to begin the slow journey home. The crew from the Cathar outpost, who had hidden in reinforced shelters during the attack, were brought aboard. They were tall, silent figures, their smooth faces giving nothing away. Their leader, a Cathar who introduced itself as Elvar, requested a meeting with Captain Lee, and to Jin's surprise, with Jin himself. They met in the captain's ready room. Captain Lee's head was bandaged. Jin stood stiffly, expecting to be court-martialed for his actions. Elvar regarded them with large, dark eyes. "We offer our gratitude for your intervention," it said, its voice a soft hum. "The scavengers would have taken everything." "It was our duty," Captain Lee said, his voice formal. He glanced at Jin, his expression unreadable. Elvar turned its gaze to Jin. The look was deep and penetrating. "And you, the one who defied logic. We have analyzed the sensor logs of the engagement. Your actions were highly improbable." Jin met its gaze, his heart pounding. He said nothing. "The oracle of our people spoke to you," Elvar stated. It was not a question. A cold shock went through Jin. He nodded slowly. "Yes," Captain Lee looked confused. "Oracle." "It is a being of pure consciousness," Elvar explained, still looking at Jin. "It calculates futures. It sees the paths of probability. It told you of this event, did it not?" Jin took a deep breath. The secret he had carried for so long felt heavy on his tongue. "It did. It told me that if I loved Mirai, it would lead to a catastrophe. It said my love would cause the destruction of this ship. It showed me a vision. A fire and a hull breach and death. It told me I must never love her." Captain Lee stared at him, his mouth slightly open. The pieces of Jin's strange behavior, his incredible risk, were suddenly falling into a terrifying picture. "And yet," Elvar said, its head tilting, "you did." "I did," Jin said, his voice firm. "And the events transpired almost exactly as foreseen," the Cathar continued. "The emotional bond, the crisis, the damage to the engineering section. Your reckless journey to reach her. The Oracle's prediction was, in its details, correct." Jin felt a surge of defiance. "But the ship is not destroyed. Everyone is not dead. We are here." "Precisely," Elvar said, and there was something new in its tone. Not anger, not disapproval. Something like awe. The prediction was correct, but the conclusion was wrong. The Oracle's model, which is flawless in its logic, failed to account for the full variable of your human spirit. Elvar took a step closer. "The Oracle saw that your love would be the spark of the crisis. It calculated that your emotional response would be a destructive, destabilizing force. It could not compute that the very same love could also be the source of the solution. It gestured with a long, slender hand. It saw you flying to her, but it interpreted it as a final, fatal error. It did not foresee that your act would provide a military distraction, allowing your ship to strike a winning blow. It did not foresee that your presence would not cause a further failure, but would instead give Chief Engineer Mirai the strength and the will to achieve a repair that was, by all logical standards, impossible. The room was utterly silent. The Oracle's logic is perfect, Elvar repeated, but it is a logic based on the universe as we understand it. Your humanity, it introduces a new mathematics, a calculus of the heart. Your love created the problem, yes, but it also created the determination, the courage and the self-sacrifice that solved it. The variable was not simply love. The variable was the entire unpredictable and powerful spectrum of human emotion that love contains. Elvar bowed its head slightly towards Jin. The Oracle's warning was a fact. Your choice to ignore it was a greater one. You have shown us that some certainties are not so certain, that a future written in numbers can be rewritten by a human will. We will take this lesson back to our people. It will take us a long time to understand it. With that, Elvar turned and glided silently from the room. Captain Lee was left staring at Jin. The sternness had left his face. He looked at the young man who had been carrying this terrible knowledge all alone, who had been told his greatest happiness would be his doom, and who had chosen happiness anyway. You should have told me, son, the captain said softly. Would you have believed me? Jin asked. The captain thought for a moment, then shook his head. No, probably not, he sighed. You are on report for stealing a shuttle and disobeying a direct order, but I think the final entry in my log will note that your unsanctioned action was instrumental in the preservation of this vessel. You are a difficult man to understand, Jin, but this ship is lucky to have you. Now get out of my ready room. A small, real smile finally touched Jin's lips. Yes, sir. He left the room and walked through the ship. The crew he passed still looked at him, but now their looks were not of confusion or judgment. They were looks of respect. He had not just saved Mirai. In defying a prophecy, he had saved all of them. He found Mirai on the observation deck. She was looking out at the stars, her arms wrapped around herself. The nebula was gone, replaced by the steady, peaceful light of countless suns. She turned as he approached. She had heard everything. The story of the Oracle had spread through the ship like wildfire. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him, her eyes full of 1,000 emotions. She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. All this time, she whispered, You knew? You knew that being with me could destroy everything? I knew what the Oracle said, Jin corrected her gently, but I never believed it. Not really, not after I met you. Tears welled in her eyes. You risked everything. The whole ship. For me? No, he said, shaking his head. He looked out at the endless stars, then back at her. I didn't risk everything for you. I believed in everything because of you. The Oracle saw our love as a flaw. I always saw it as our strength. And I was right. He pulled her close and she rested her head against his shoulder. They stood there together in the quiet dome surrounded by the universe. The Oracle had warned him never to love her. It had given him a future written in fire and ruin, so he had loved her. And in doing so, he had not walked into a predestined doom. He had carved out a new destiny. He had proven that the most powerful force in the universe was not cold, unfeeling logic, but the beautiful, illogical, and unpredictable human heart. And as he held the woman he loved looking out at the infinite possibilities of space, he knew that their story was just beginning.